Alright guys, welcome back to another episode of AI News, Drama, and Updates. What you're seeing on your screen right now is a demonstration of a technology called NERF. We've talked about it before. Now it's evolved into something they're calling resonance field splatting. Essentially what you're seeing is drone footage that's been turned into an AI-generated three-dimensional scene. So we're able to navigate through the scene similar to what you might have seen in like Neo from the Matrix, where we can kind of spin around a central point. A lot of these scenes are being imagined by an AI. And as this tech starts to get better and better, you're going to start to see less and less of these cloud formations, which are really just kind of the in-between, where the AI couldn't figure out what to put there. It's a very cool effect, though, and we're starting to see a lot of really cool examples just like this. But speaking of AI, I did want to start with a fun little story, because I was actually caught a little bit off guard by this. I assumed, like probably a lot of people, that the .ai, instead of .com or .org or something like that, I thought that that came with AI. I thought that they kind of invented it, and that's where a lot of these websites came from. But it turns out that that's actually a country. And maybe I'm stupid for not figuring this out sooner, but this tiny British island territory with this .ai extension is now pulling in $30 million in revenue this year just from these companies that have, adopted the AI namespace. One of the bigger AI domains we talked about recently was x.ai. And when Elon Musk is involved, I'm sure a lot of money probably did change hands. But switching gears a little bit to another update on a story, we've covered the fact that OpenAI's got a lot of different litigation going on, a lot of different lawsuits from a lot of different sources. One of the more notable ones is Sarah Silverman. You can see her right here holding her own book. And the claim that her and others like her are trying to make is that ChatGPT is built on their knowledge. Now, while that argument doesn't take into consideration that their knowledge is also derivative as well, the update that I have for you here is that OpenAI, I believe, is making that case, and they're asking for these things to be dismissed. It says here that OpenAI's position is that authors are misconceiving the scope of copyright. By failing to take into consideration how copyright actually functions, especially surrounding fair use, their case, according to OpenAI, doesn't make a lot of sense. They also pointed out a notable case that took place against Google Books. A case that I guess made it quite clear that the copyright is to the material itself and not necessarily the statistics, the word frequencies, and the patterns and things like that that you can kind of derive from the book. Those things aren't protected by copyright. Basically, what this seems to boil down to is the team filing the lawsuit is trying to make the claim that every output of GPT is derivative. Now, that part is true, but they're also making the claim that that is copyrighted material. And OpenAI is basically saying if you ask the question of, who is the president, and you get the correct answer, how could that be copyrighted material? So they're asking that the case be dismissed because it's not true that every output is copywritten material. There are a number of interesting legal theories and arguments on both sides of this, so the link is going to be in the description if you want to check it out. But like we've talked about here many times in the past, digital copyright is a very loaded issue, and there's going to have to be some changes made to the way that intellectual property is considered in this new world where computers can actually learn now. Switching gears completely, without getting too much into the political side, I just want to let you know that the Air Force is requesting $6 billion to build AI-controlled drones. Don't you feel safer? What you're seeing here is a picture of the XQ-58A Valkyrie, which is admittedly a cool-looking airplane, but it looks like it also costs $3 million a piece. Now, obviously, this is an extremely necessary expense. Great use of my tax dollars, so I'll leave you with that. But if you want to check out a little bit more about the XQ-58A Valkyrie, there's going to be a link in the description. And touching back on OpenAI, this week they introduced the enterprise service of OpenAI's ChatGPT-4. And this is the more privatized version of GPT-4 that we'd kind of talked about, where it separates the corporate data from the rest of the world. So training data here wouldn't get infected into the rest of the world. This is a far better solution for a company, a far safer solution, I should say, to having their employees just simply use GPT-4 from their browser. But not only do you get GPT-4, but you get a different version of it, a faster version, a version that has more context. I haven't seen caps on GPT-4 or Code Interpreter in a little while, but this service kind of guarantees that you will not see that. That should be included with the service. It's going to cost the company, I'm sure, a lot more than it's going to cost me as a consumer to get regular GPT-4 service. But this is going to be an enterprise-level service. Everything is encrypted. It's much more secure, it seems like. But pushing OpenAI aside, pushing even GPT aside, talking for a minute about Google and Google Gemini. This is something that's not publicly released yet to my knowledge. And this article, I'm going to include it in the description. It is very technical, But what we're looking at is kind of a breakdown of how Google's Gemini compares to GPT-4. Everything I've read so far would lead me to believe that this is a system that is capable of outclassing GPT-4. While the headline here says by 5 times, I'm not exactly sure how accurate that is or what level they're measuring. One thing that I will point out where I had to humble myself a little bit is when the world started changing in AI in general, I had a lot of hope that Google was going to rise up and stand on top of everyone else. And that just didn't seem to happen. OpenAI just kept crushing them over and over again. Even Bing really seemed to get in the way and kind of wreck what Google was up to. And to be honest, I thought what we were seeing was the start of the fall of Google. Now, they made a ton of missteps, and this is probably not the solution, but it looks like the audible that they pulled to put all of their eggs into the basket of AI might suddenly start to pay off here. We can't lose sight of the amount of hardware that Google simply has access to that other people don't. OpenAI is an incredibly rich company, but still nothing compared to Google and the data centers that they've operated for decades. So while Google Search remains Google Search and there's some generative elements being added, and Google Bard does exist, what Google's also been working on is this Gemini thing. This is the combination project where they brought the DeepMind people in and everything kind of working together to really turn around the business model of Google before it collapsed. This article talks about it a little bit, but there's a bottleneck when it comes to this technology. And that bottleneck is the compute, the amount of processors, the amount of processing that the company is capable of doing. Google is the most compute-rich firm in the world. So they have an advantage when it comes to building up faster than most of their competition. And Facebook/Meta is number 2. So in an actual tech versus tech race, Google does have a compute advantage and can certainly move faster. And it seems like that could be finally coming to fruition. So we're going to keep an eye on this, especially as things become more publicly available. And we'll see what Google has up their sleeve. But switching gears a little bit and switching countries, actually, China has finally allowed Chinese citizens access to their version of ChatGPT, which is run by Baidu. And we talked about this previously. Ernie Bot, which is GPT-4, it's kind of a multimodal LLM. It was originally sort of a stable diffusion thing, and then they converted it into a large language model when ChatGPT started really taking off. And what we're left with here appears to be a multimodal model, capable of generating images and text. Now, this isn't China's only large language model, but it is one of the largest and certainly one of the ones we've talked about a couple of times here. This article has a link directly to the website, so if you want to check it out, you can. If you speak Chinese, that's probably a little bit easier, but Google Chrome allows me to automatically translate, so Wen Xin Yi Yan is useful, interesting, and warm. In the world of entertainment and video games, imagine having a large language model listen to what you're saying, realize that you are a toxic piece of crap, and boot you from the game that you were trying to play. That is the future that we have created. Now, while I don't necessarily have a problem with something like this, I have a feeling this is going to be one of those free speech, hot button type issues where people are just going to be upset that robots are kind of telling them what they can and can't say. So Call of Duty seems to have partnered with an AI company that appears to be called Modulate, and it integrates this voice modulating tool called ToxMod. So it's going to be listening to you, it's going to wait until you say something, and then boom, you get banned. Now, it does look to me like if you're worried about just getting banned by a robot, that's not really how it works. It'll flag what you're saying, it goes to a person, that person makes a final decision. So it can actually just search out toxicity on a greater level and then allow people to, I guess, view the recordings? This article even goes on to talk about the stuff that it knows is going to be controversial. For example, the N-word and the usage of that within the Black community. That is a topic I am not going to touch on this channel whatsoever, but if you have opinions on it, I would love to see your comments. Based on their quote here, it also seems like the system is going to assume what your age is based on how you sound. So if you sound prepubescent, it's going to identify you as potentially a child and maybe try to protect you accordingly. I mean, I don't know that reducing the toxicity in a Call of Duty game is necessarily a bad thing. I just don't know that this is going to be the catch-all that we hope it will be. We'll see what happens. It should be good content. Switching gears a little bit to an ML-based technology that just came out from Meta, and it got released under the Apache 2 license, so this is open source now. This graphic is a great example of what appears to be an intermediary technology. You could run a video through this tech to kind of separate things. And similar to something like ControlNet in Stable Diffusion, you could generate graphics based on the individual frames that have resulted. Turning this little running puppy into an AI-generated video, when you have the Dino V2 input to use, for example, it's much easier to separate the background from the foreground. It's much easier to create a totally different type of video with more information on how the original video makes sense. It's really interesting to see how the technology actually breaks things down, because we've seen a lot of these individual elements in frame-to-frame things like Stable Diffusion's ControlNet. For example, this depth transformer is something we saw with ControlNet. We still see it in ControlNet. You might even remember when we talked about Segment Anything, which was a technology that Meta came up with themselves to segment the different things and separate them from the background. So I'm not quite sure what to make of the fact that the US Copyright Office is asking for the public opinions of the people. The copyright laws as they stand, as I see them, they're meant to protect capital, not people. So I'm not quite sure what they're going to do with that data, because it's likely to be the lobbyists, the capital interests, and the people that ultimately make the laws that determine the future of copyright law. But in the meantime, if you'd like to fill out their survey, I'll definitely include the link in the description. This is certainly a link that I saw being passed from artist to artist around Twitter in the anti-AI world, where they just really want, AI art to go away. This article does go on to talk a little bit about how a lot of people have been trying to copyright AI-assisted things by using AI as a co-author, basically saying, hey, me and ChatGPT wrote this book together. Which to me is a little bit weird. It's like coming up with a mathematical theory and saying, hey, me and the calculator put this together. If AI is just a tool that helps you write a story, then it's you that is the author, not the AI tool. Now, that said, if it's just a tool that you own and you're just trying to copyright something that you had no part in creating, that is where I would draw the line personally. You would definitely need to have some level of involvement to have your name attached to it. But until such time as we figure out new copyright rules that everyone can agree with, Google is working with putting the idea of watermarks into the imagery that it creates. Now, this is specifically just to things that are created using ImGen, which, to be honest, is probably one of the smallest generators out there. Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, things like that, I doubt you're going to see a watermark there anytime soon, but who knows? If this idea takes off and becomes popular, then for all we know, this might be something that you see go into those other technologies and be adopted very easily. Now, these watermarks, and at least the examples that we're given here, they don't appear to be obvious. You can't really tell that there's a watermark that's been added, and that's the idea. Now, that said, you can easily tell that these are AI art because ImGen is not on the same level as some of the other options that are out there right now. In fact, if you're looking at it from which ones need a watermark, this is probably the one that needs it the least. But people who are using the generative tools in Adobe Firefly, for example, there is some level of AI detection there as well, and there is a watermark, from my understanding, that's added somewhere in the program. I don't have any experience with Firefly myself, so if you have tried it and you have anything to add, please leave a comment. I'd be dying to hear more about it. But one of the last things that I wanted to talk about today is this article, VFX artists showing Hollywood using AI to create and not exploit. The idea that people are losing jobs to AI and things like that, this is the other side of the coin. These are artists that are using AI to create the technology around you. Specifically, let's talk about Pixar for a moment and the movie Elemental. Now, this was not an AI-generated scene in a classical sense. However, artificial intelligence machine learning-based technology was used to partially generate this scene. This is a technology called NST. And you can see exactly what it does. It just adds style to the flames. The scene itself was 99% done by Pixar, and then they used this to add a stylistic change to it. And technologies like this, not necessarily just AI art or AI video, are likely to be the technologies that we slowly start seeing involved in our modern entertainment. And I've mentioned this a number of times because of the sheer irony, but James Cameron used a similar technology with the making of Avatar 2. Yes, the same James Cameron who made the Terminator movie. And I think this scene in this article also paints a great picture of what I've been saying from the beginning with the AI art argument, which is a lot of these artists are not being replaced. These are professional artists in a professional studio. This is Pixar that we're looking at, and we have to think about how long they've been using this type of technology. I mean, Elemental came out a while ago. This movie was in development for a long time. And I wanted to end on this note because I think it does give a lot of food for thought when we talk about copyright, when we talk about the idea of digital involvement in what we're creating. I think it's important to start considering how much work is really being put in by the human and how much work is being done by the machine, especially in the world of 3D art, in shaders, in a lot of things that the computer is doing 99% of the heavy lifting. This is a very heavy consideration in this new era of copyright. But that's my 2 cents on it. I'm just a drop in the pond. I would love to hear your comments on it. Please, again, hit me up in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, drop me a like. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. I'd love to see you around. Thank you, as always, for your time today, and I'll see you next week for another AI news, drama, and updates. Thanks for watching.